From 2 Corinthians chapter 1, beginning in verse 12, Paul writes, "Now this is our boast. Our conscience testifies that we have conducted ourselves in the world, and especially in our relations with you, in the holiness and sincerity that are from God. We have done so not according to the worldly wisdom, but according to God's grace." And then over to 2 Corinthians chapter 2, beginning in verse 14. "But thanks be to God, who always leads us in triumphal procession in Christ, and through us spreads everywhere the fragrance of the knowledge of Him. For we are to God the aroma of Christ among those who are being saved and those who are perishing. To the one we are the smell of death, to the other the fragrance of life. And who is equal to such a task?" Who is equal to such a task? Well, today is Mother's Day, so I want to honor our mothers by directing my message, especially to the mothers, and at the same time, I direct the message to all of us. In other words, I'm saying, don't fall asleep during my message. My message is simple. Hold the fort. Because there's very little left between the preservation of your family and its complete destruction. And all that is left is mostly you, the mothers. The cavalry is not coming. You are, mothers, the cavalry. Anybody watch the movie Dances with Wolves? Ever seen the movie Dances with Wolves? It's one of my favorite movies. Kevin Costner's in it, but that's beside the point. Dances with Wolves is when Lieutenant John J. Dunbar, he's a Civil War veteran. He was injured in the Civil War, but then he gets a choice of where he wants to go to fulfill his next soldierly duty, and he goes out to the western frontier in the very hostile country, Indian Territory. And so he gets a ride with in a mule train with this mule skinner named Timmons, and they make their journey west for a few days out to, the prairies somewhere. And he finally gets to the soldier fort, and it's completely abandoned. It's terrible. It's run down, and there's caves in the hills where the soldiers probably hid out because they were attacked by hostile Indians. And so when the mule skinner, Timmons, sees this, he goes, "Okay, it's time to go home." He wants to turn around the wagon and go back. But Lieutenant John J. Dunbar says, "No, this is my post. I will stay here." And the mule skinner starts arguing with the man. He says, "There's no way. Look, there's nobody here. It's a total desolate. You're not going to last a week out here." And of course, this wagon train is all full of all his supplies that brought out there with him. And at the final point, when he pulls out his pistol and he points it at the mule skinner, he says, "This is my post, and I'm not leaving." And then Timmons gets a message. This is the intensity mothers must have about their families. This is their post, and nothing is going to dissuade them from carrying out their duty. I say this in all seriousness this morning, because there are numerous institutions, forces, and powers that be out there right now who are not only antagonistic to the nuclear family, but seek its complete and total destruction. You might ask yourself, well, why don't they go after the academia? Why don't they go after the business sector? Why don't they go after the government to destroy America? The answer is they've already done that. They have already infiltrated the institutions of higher learning and business monopolies, and certain branches of government are already in the clutches of the enemy. And now they are turning their attention to the nuclear family with a goal to destroy it. All that's left to conquer is the family. The strong nuclear family, as God's ordained institution, is the last bastion, the final obstacle that stands in the way of the complete takeover of our country by those who hate it and those who seek to destroy it. And then the question you might ask, why do they want to destroy the United States of America? That's a good question. I'll tell you why. because God is at the foundation of the United States of America. They flat out hate God. It's the same reason so many countries hate the nation of Israel and seek its total destruction. God brought forth the nation of Israel to be a light to the nations of the world, and the United States is cut out of the same fabric as the nation of Israel. We in Israel stand for the same thing, the service of God, to honor God, to love God. Remember back probably a year ago now when I was preaching through the book of Psalms, and I think I only made it to Psalm 23, or I'll get back to it. I'm warning you right now. I'll get back to that. But if you recall, it didn't take us very long to discover how the nations were and are violently opposed to God. Immediately in Psalm chapter 2, David asked, "Why do the nations conspire? Why do the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand, the rulers against the anointed one, against the Lord and against his anointed one. They say, let us break the chains, let us throw off their fetters." That's what David says about the people who are against God. When you think about chains and you think about fetters, they're obviously tools and instruments to restrict, to punish, to enslave. So David is basically saying that there are many people, and therefore, when you get a bunch of people together, what do you get? You get a nation, right? So David is saying that these nations, these people, they view God's authority and his commandments not as protective boundaries that bring health and happiness and peace and joy and prosperity and purpose. Rather, these God's authority, they view it as an obstacle for people to get peace and joy. They see it as a hindrance. They see God's loving and benevolent rule as detrimental and burdensome to the pursuit of happiness. That God is a killjoy. He's not letting me do what I want to do with my life. I'm not going to stand up here and say America's perfect. I understand that. Far from it. But the idea of America is perfect because it is inspired and ordained by God. And it's for this reason we must protect and continue to fight for America. We must fight for it because it is based on God's Word and God's principles. The idea that every citizen is unique and a valuable creation of God. That each of us, by the simple fact that we exist, we have God-given rights and we have God-given responsibilities. And we have the potential to be part of the larger, bright, shining light on the hill that helps all nations come to know and worship God. That is the reason America was formed in the first place. Of course, if we look at it now, and it is twisted and perverted in many ways, because we've gone away from the central reason of its creation. Now, you might ask this morning, why, Pastor Bill, are you so concerned about America? Well, I think the reason should be obvious. This is where I live. This is where I'm raising my family. This is the country where is my home, and where my children's will be their home, and where their children's children. And my hope is that I will be able to give to them a country where they'll be able to freely worship God and conduct their lives freely and openly in a way that honors and pleases God. I don't want them to have to go underground just to practice their faith and express the truth. I've been reading a book, and it talks a lot about how Christians had to live under communist and Nazi regimes. And how really, if they were above ground, they had to live double lives. Only when they were down underground, fellowshipping with other Christians, could they truly be free. See, I want people to live in a country where our founding fathers designed this country to be, where every individual is given the opportunity and the freedom to pursue life and liberty and joy and happiness. Now, after hearing this morning, you might think, well, Pastor Bill, you're becoming an alarmist. It's not really that bad out there, is it? Well, if you want to call me an alarmist, I don't care. Go ahead and call me that. People call other people alarmists when they don't see what the alarmists see. That's all it is. When I don't see, when you see something and you try to bring attention to something, and they don't see it, well, they'll just call you an alarmist. But we cannot ignore and deny the writing on the wall. Here's just a few of them. One, we talked about, Shirley already talked about it, and Lily talked about it this morning. Abortion on demand is not only legal in this country, it's promoted. Murdering of the unborn babies is not viewed as a crime, it's viewed as a protected right for people. Our country even invents new ways of snuffing out life. RU48, the day after pills, is one perfect example of that. You know, I could stop right here and be completely satisfied with my making the case that our society is hostile and seeks the destruction of the nuclear family. Right there, that point alone, and I could just sit down. That point alone makes my case. When society lets this happen right under its nose, there can be no confusion as to what this nation's stance is on family. Kill it, destroy it, eliminate it. The unborn are the parents of the next generation, aren't they? They're the parents of the future families. But we don't care. In the name of convenience, to remain unfettered in our responsibilities of parenthood, we go ahead and destroy families. That's just one way. Number two, government policies that encourage absentee fatherhood. Government policies put in place to encourage absentee fatherhood in the family. You want to live comfortably in your life and never work another day in your life? Here, I got the perfect solution for you to do this. All you have to do is follow this one rule. Make sure the father of your children is nowhere to be seen. Then the government will step in and become your father. That's what they want. Of course, this sort of dad won't play catch with your children, won't take them to the zoo, won't take them to the church, won't be the father figure that every child needs. But at least they'll get a smartphone, they'll get some food in their cupboards, and they might even get a new backpack for school. Obviously, isn't that more important? The materialism, isn't that much more important than the presence and influence of a father in a family's life? 3, public schools that teach that the traditional family structure with one mom and one dad, it's old-fashioned. It's an outdated model for the family. They say to us now, you need to be progressive. You need to embrace change. We need to tear down the traditional family values and exchange them for perversions of what the family is. That only leads to chaos and to instability and depression and suicide. Now the question is, why would anybody want to do these sorts of things? Why would anybody want to do this? Why would they even want to promote this? Do they not see the damage they are creating? Do they really think that they are not harming anyone? That they really are on the side of goodness and justice by promoting these things? Are they completely oblivious to the harm they're doing? Why would anybody want to corrupt young minds like this? Have their children suffer physically, emotionally, spiritually by promoting these ideas? Well, I'll tell you the primary reason for that. It's that if you want to start a revolution, you be patient, and you start with the youngest people first. Feed them the lie, one after another, and pretty soon the people of the country will begin to believe it. Don't bother with the older folks. They're a lost cause. We're too set in our ways, but the little ones, get a hold of them. They're like little sponges, and they'll soak up all these things. And then not only will they start soaking up, they'll start believing it. And once they believe it, they start living it. That's why motherhood is the most important job in the world right now. Always has been. Mothers exist to protect and to guide and our future generations. I remember when I was in Alaska, I was invited to the Northwestern fishing vessel. That's captained by Sig Hansen up there. They wanted the local preacher, and I happen to be the local preacher. They wanted the local preacher to come up and say a blessing on the captain and the crew and the boat before they ventured out on their new fishing season. And so I was more than happy to participate. But before I prayed, I asked them. I gathered these men together. There's only maybe 5 there's a captain and the engineer and 3 or 4 fishermen on the boat. They all gathered together, and before I started praying for them, I said, I gave them one question. I said this. I said, how do you feel? How do you feel about having the second most deadliest job in the world? And they go, huh? What are you talking about? I thought I was doing the most deadliest job in the world, deadliest catch. I said, you are braving the elements of the ocean, of the weather, the unpredictableness of commercial fishing. But your wife is back braving the elements of responsibilities and the unexpected circumstance of raising your children. See, these guys, they kind of actually enjoyed going up because they're away from their family. I says, you guys have it easy here. We should be praying for your wives at home, trying to raise your kids. They all kind of thought, that's interesting. They kind of nodded their head. Maybe I even got through to them. I don't know. It's not that parenting is overly hard. There are countless tedious, mundane, uneventful activities in parenting that happen constantly. A child, you're sitting on the bed of your child, hoping and praying that soon they will fall asleep so that maybe you can go fall asleep. Maybe you're cleaning the kitchen or doing the laundry or chauffeuring them around to another orthodontist appointment or basketball practice or something. These are not difficult tasks, really. Very mundane. But here's the thing. They still try our patience, don't they? What's important is that moms are present in the moment because they offer to our children security and comfort and offer life lessons that they're going to get nowhere else. Moms do not raise children in a day. They raise them over a lifetime. It's a long process that has wonderful and glorious moments. Maybe a graduation. Maybe someone getting their driver's license. There's so many moments that we rejoice and thank God for. There's also trying and painful moments in motherhood as they try to raise their children. There's chaotic moments. A lot of chaos in families. And then there's faith-building moments as well. Not only for the children, but for the mom. Because, as Natasha said earlier, mothers can't do this on their own. They need God. Any mother out there who doesn't rely on God to help them raise their children is missing out on the most important resource for being a mother. I had one of those faith-building moments just the other night. Sometimes I have to take on the role of the mother. Not very often. I'm not very good at it. Can't be as good as Julie, but I was sitting at the dinner table, and Lily was decompressing after another week of sixth grade school. They don't hardly say boo at school, but when they come home, they won't turn off, and they got to share what's going on at their school. And Lily was telling me how this girl said that and that girl said that, and I just patiently listened to all the silly things that these girls say to one another at school. And then I finally, after she got done, she took a breath. I tried to get something in it. And I said, "Have you ever seen the lemming video?" And her response was, what is a lemming? She didn't even know what a lemming is. Maybe you guys don't know what a lemming is. Well, if you don't know, the lemming video it was a nature documentary actually put out by Disney way back in 1958. And I I remember seeing it in school. Maybe you saw it in school. But it's the craziest thing you ever seen. These little Arctic rodents are running and jumping off the cliff. They're all hundreds of them, and they're running, and then they get to the cliff, and they don't stop. They just go flying through the air and land in the ocean below, and then they swim around for a while. Then they quit swimming. Now, does this actually happen? I don't even know. I mean, I've heard stories that Disney made all this up just for a good production, and it doesn't really happen. It's one of the 10 greatest myths of the world, that these lemmings jump off the cliff. I don't know, but it proved my point. It made a point that I want to share with Liz. It said, don't follow the crowd. Think for yourself. Just because all your classmates believe this way or that way doesn't mean you have to. Doesn't mean you have to be the lemming that jumps off the cliff. And your mother probably said that to you. Didn't she always say that to you? Says, if you see all your friends jump off the cliff, are you gonna follow them? It's the same idea. You have to study the issue. You have to view the issue from God's Word. Then you can make your mind up about what is right and wrong. This is probably one of the most important lessons a mother can teach her children. To seek truth, to live by truth, to share the truth. If we do this, then we can be fully assured that the gates of hell will not overcome us, because we know that God is with us and God is truth. God is with us. So this brings us to the text I read at the outset here. Paul is writing to the Corinthian church, and I want us to see this from the perspective of a mother really trying to communicate with their children. Because that's kind of, in a sense, what's going on. The Corinthian church is like Paul's spiritual children. And he's quite frustrated with them because they're not acting very Christian. They're very immature, and Paul so desires them to grow up in the Lord and start acting like they should be in honor and pleasing before God. And so that's why, I titled this message, Today Shade, Tomorrow Sunshine. It's like the parent is reasoning with the child. Paul's saying this, and I paraphrase here, this is my relationship with you. I've tried to conduct myself with holiness and sincerity with you. I try to operate in God's grace and to use godly wisdom that brings life to you and me, not foolishness and brings only death and emptiness. That's kind of what Paul is saying here. And then Paul continues to his spiritual children. He says, I'm writing this stuff to you now that someday in the future the light will go on. And you will see, Paul says to them, how right I am about this. And then he says, I really don't care if you credit me with being right. I don't care about that so much. But I want you to see that I am promoting God's rightness. And I am encouraging you to follow God's ways. And if later someday you think back and you go and boast about me and say, you know what? He was right. Paul says, I'll take that credit. That'd be nice. But right now he says, I know you're throwing, and here's a kind of a millennial term, I know you're throwing shade on me. That's how he says that now. Somebody's shading you. That means, someone's like, giving you the whatever, shade. It means, yeah, you're not getting the light, right? You're getting the shade. So that means, but Paul says that's okay. Because I'm doing what is right in the eyes of the Lord, and a big part of this rightness comes from me knowing that God is not finished with you. That's what he's saying. And he's going to bring you along in his rightness, in his perfect timing. God's not finished with you. I think that's what mothers really, what motivates them to get up in the morning and to do all the tasks they have to do is because they're saying to themselves, God is not finished with these kids. In other words, mothers are so good at taking the grief. They're so good at taking the shade from their children today because they know and have hope and have faith that in the end, God is going to do the mighty work in the children's lives. I see this every day as I watch my wife go about doing her responsibilities. She takes a lot of grief. She takes a lot of shade. But she keeps going. She won't give up the fort. Just as Paul has hope in the Corinthian church, that they'll mature, they'll come to know Christ in a deeper and more loving way. So a mother has hope that one day she'll boast in her child's devotion to the Lord. In the present, there is shade. In the future, there is sunshine and glory. Also in chapter 2, verses 14 through 16, and also it has that verse I just want to touch on here. It says, and it's really a part of God's calling for mothers as well, and that is, who is equal to such a task? Fathers aren't. We're happy-go-lucky guys. We want to go work on our cars or play golf or mow the lawn or, we'll run the other way. Oh, I gotta mow the lawn right now. I don't want to, have to deal with my kid. But that's an extremely poignant question concerning motherhood. Who is equal to such a task? When you think about it, a mother is a vessel in more ways than one. First, God gave her a womb that she would carry a precious child from conception to birth. God gave a mother breasts so she could nourish her infant. And then God gave her a heart where Christ lives in her and promises to reside in her so that she can fulfill her duties as a mother. To be the teacher, to be the guide, to be the model, to instruct the youth in the way they should go so they can honor and please God. And that they might find eternal life. But all these capacities, all the capacities that God has given mothers, they come at a great sacrifice, both physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And I know I see it every day. Only a mom is equal to such a task. She sacrifices willingly because though she may feel the shade today, and it comes in different forms. It comes in the unruly child, in the antagonistic child, in the rebellious youth. And she experiences that. That's called shade. The form of exhaustion when she's not getting enough sleep. She's willing to experience all that because she knows the sunshine is coming. She knows the victory parade is on its way because the fragrance of Christ is in her. And it's going to spread through her and go everywhere. So mothers, don't give up the fort. The country, the church, this world is counting on you.